Louisville, Kentucky is a big city and home of the famous Kentucky Derby. It's 1 o'clock in the morning and a fire call is reported to 911. A small apartment building is ablaze. The fire department, and they put the fire out. So arson investigators respond to these major fires to determine exactly how this began. As they examine the remains, rags and clothing piled together, it becomes obvious to them that this fire was intentionally set.
Lieutenant, come check this out.
In this apartment, they discover human remains. Is this an accidental death? Is this someone who succumbed to... The arson investigator takes one step back and says,
"Call Metro. Tell them to get homicide down here right away."
They're not a suspect. They're a victim. There is a large knife protruding from their face. Wow. I spent my career closing murder cases. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
I'm a retired detective from the Louisville Metro Police Department. I worked there for 20 years. At least 11 of those were in homicide. I was always drawn to the process of investigations, working with homicide victims who don't have a voice, who can't tell you anything about what happened.
Late into law enforcement, she was 29 when she came on the job. Worked hard, got assigned to homicide, was under a strong light because she was a woman.
I was the only female there, so I always wanted to prove myself as worthy and capable. It's just by nature. At that point, I was in homicide for 2 years. 2 years sounds like a long time, but you're here.
Years, too. She's learning, and this case will teach her a lot.
Dispatch requesting homicide at the 100 block of Harlan Avenue.
Copy.
On this particular night, I was working the 4 to midnight shift. I was at the top of the list for the next homicide, and I responded to the scene.
Lieutenant? So what do we got here?
We were briefed by arson investigators that they had located a body within the home, and it did appear that there was foul play involved.
If you die in a fire because the building burns and you're unable to, and that it's an accidental fire, you are an accidental death, and it's the sole responsibility of the fire department to complete the investigation. However, if arson is determined, then it becomes a criminal event that someone died in the course of an intentionally set fire. Then when you observe weapons are involved, there's no question it's a criminal. So it moves from accidental fire in the hands of the fire department to intentional murder and into the hands of the police.
Is it safe to go in?
Air quality isn't great, but we should be all right.
Nothing worse than a fire scene. Even though the fire is out, the heat is so intense, it retains for long periods of time. And you can barely breathe because of the odor. I've responded to a number of fire scenes involving deaths. Everything made by man contains petroleum products of some type, be they plastic or asphalt or rayon or nylon or whatever they are, a unique odor. that permeates your clothing, even your shoes. I have thrown away everything I was wearing at a fire scene. You cannot recover the odor from the clothing or even the shoes because you will smell it forever. You never forget the odor of death, ever. And you never forget the odor of burning flesh, human flesh.
Arson investigators took us to the body, which appeared to be laying on a bed face up.
Let's take a look.
It's hard to determine what exactly you're looking at. So we had to get a little pictures. There was an obvious knife stuck in the face.
You ever seen anything like that?
That was very, very unusual. Nothing I've ever seen before, and certainly nothing I've ever seen since.
Maroney's looking at this crime scene, and it's extremely personal. The stabbing in the face is somebody wanting to eliminate you, to destroy your memory. It's pure hate that drives that.
And then after that, you look at the style of the knife.
Looks like a kitchen knife.
The person there armed himself with a weapon of opportunity, in a drawer, whatever, and he attacks the victim with it. So it's not a planned event. And now we have to unravel this. How did this person come to be here in the condition they are in?
All right. Let's go take a look around and see who this guy is.
In identifying this victim, we always want to start with who lives here. Seeing that, you look for mail and you look for personal items around the house.
Hey, you got anything back there?
Not much.
Guess that was the point.
Based on the evidence that we saw at the crime scene with pages of books being torn out and scattered about the room in general, it wouldn't happen that way unless it was deliberate.
This is Icarus, to try to destroy evidence and destroy a body, which is incredibly difficult to do. You're trying to scratch up the dirt to cover up the evidence of your sins. And it's not going to work. It never does.
Hey, Sarge.
Yeah.
Check this out.
Fortunately, not a book that waiters typically carry in restaurants. I waited tables. I recognized it immediately.
All right. Let's get this back for evidence.
So when Maroney is inside examining the scene, a very concerned citizen shows
in here. This is a restricted area.
my place.
My name's Daryl Benzel. My wife and I, we own about 3 homes, 4 units altogether. Harlan Avenue was one of our first. That night, my neighbor called to tell us that our house was on fire. So I rushed over there, and it was a devastating sight.
You got to tell me what's going on. Is there anyone inside?
He's dead. And I'm like, oh, Lord. And about that time, I saw Lee.
Daryl?
Chester, 1964.
But hey, Daryl, what brings you here? And he informed me at that point that he owned the house.
I knew her father and brother, and then I met Lee, and we developed a friendship.
It's rare to see him. But once I did, I thought, well, great. I know him. He'll be comfortable speaking with me. I could probably get a lot of information from him.
How many people live here?
Just one. The rest of the units are all vacant.
Do you have a name?
Yeah, it's Eddie. It's Eddie Pointer.
I had actually met several months prior to this incident.
She looks back at these charred remains with a blade through its face and says, God, Eddie, what happened to you? It's bad enough to look at a stranger. To look at somebody you know and you knew in life, it's just the worst feeling.
How'd you know this guy anyway?
He's friends with my brother. I actually met him not that long ago.
He was waiting tables in a restaurant called Cunningham's, and my brother and I hello to my brother. I just know that Eddie made a big impact on my brother.
They were in AA together.
Eddie Pointer. He's had a long history of suffering from substance abuse, both alcohol and drugs. He joined Alcoholics Anonymous.
The AA program is all about helping someone get and stay sober. And so in this case, he
trying to get himself together to be a lot more responsible. He tried to help others.
He became a sponsor for dozens of people. He has done a lot to come back from the abyss that he was about to fall into.
Every homicide victim I've encountered, I did not know. I knew nothing about them. So this was an unusual case for me, knowing that, and it really did change my view of victims from then on. I didn't look at my victims as numbers. They just became human. One of the first things we do in a homicide investigation is what's called a neighborhood canvas. What they heard, what they know.
Morning, ma'am. Metro PD. Just hoping you can answer some questions for me.
Okay, sure.
I worked for the Louisville Metro Police Department for 22 years before I retired. Sometimes you have certain cases that really pique your interest, and this is one of those cases. You have a fire that somebody tried to light and cover up the death. When you have a knife stabbed to the face, I mean, it's just scary.
Morning, ma'am.
Hello.
Metro PD.
We went and did our canvas. We spoke with several people. They said that Eddie, he was a nice guy. He worked. I mean, I didn't hear a bad thing about him at all. There was nothing out there that would have caused somebody to come after him and kill him.
Because the injuries were was the cause of death.
You're not going to die if somebody plants a knife blade under your cheekbone. The odds are you're going to survive that 99 times out of 100.
So we needed to wait for the autopsy to give us the understanding of what exactly caused the victim's death.
So, what are we looking at?
Well, take a look at this.
Stab wounds are discovered, multiple wounds through the lungs, through the liver, through the abdominal aorta, all over the place. A blitz attack with a knife. Stab, 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 stab. And the final blow is the one in the face.
Homicide 101 is, to that degree, has an emotional component to it. Maybe he had a relationship with this person. Maybe he was a friend. So you start from there and you work out.
So it's now to the point to where Maroney has to notify the family of Mr. Pointer, Faye Brown, who is the mother to Mr. Pointer.
His mom lived in a different city in Kentucky. They were a very close-knit family.
He didn't deserve this.
Brown tells Maroney that Mr. Pointer was born and raised in a small town in Kentucky and that Eddie is gay. Initially, when Eddie Pointer was gay until later in his life.
He grew up in Edmonton, Kentucky. That's part of the Bible Belt. And probably at that time when he was growing up, something you didn't come out and say.
Mr. Pointer felt it was important to move into a big city where there is a possibility of a more favorable environment for those who are homosexual. So he elected to move to Louisville for that reason.
be happy or find other people that he wanted to be with.
So at this point, what we want to find out is who was responsible for Eddie's murder. Did Eddie have any significant relationships? What is he dating anybody? Who were his closest friends? quickly. I was contacted by Gary Perry. He was very close friends with Eddie, and that if there was any information that he could provide, he wanted to assist in this because Eddie was so dear to him.
This is where we'd usually
go.
It was a small hole in the wall gay bar downtown, a little bit more homey than a busy dance bar.
Eddie was real quiet. He didn't drink. He just came for the company.
Gary said Eddie didn't socialize a lot, that he wasn't necessarily in a romantic relationship with him.
It was plain.
Gary explains that one of Pointer's best friends is a 73-year-old man who is also gay, whose name is Blaine Thacker.
Eddie and Blaine were both gay men in the restaurant industry and worked odd hours, and I think they just struck a friendship.
Just very, very good friends. He was hard on his luck. Eddie lived with Blaine for a little bit, or on and off.
Maroney says, okay, so Blaine Thacker, have you seen him lately?
Come to think of it, he hasn't been in here lately either.
Is that unusual for him?
Yeah, I'd say it is.
When someone is doing something that's beyond their usual activities and they're associated, why are you not in here like you always are? And your friend is dead. Did you have something to do with that?
So, Anna Masterson? Hi. Hey, Detective Lee.
They go to the restaurant where Blaine Thacker works and find out some very interesting information.
I was looking for one of your cooks, Blaine Thacker.
I'm co-owner of Masterson's Case for around 30 years, and we were very concerned when he didn't show up. Blaine was always there, always on time. He was early.
We called his house. No one answered.
We just kind of gave it benefit of the doubt. Maybe he'll show up later. But the second day he didn't show up, we knew there was something wrong.
Mr. Thacker, are you in there? It's Metro PD, open up.
It was concerned to us, and so we went over to the apartment and had the manager open up the door for us. We went into the apartment.
Mr. Thacker?
We went into the back room. So you could see he was dead. We moved all the blankets. It was obvious that he had been stabbed numerous times.
It's this very similar method as to what is seen in Mr. Pointer. It is a blitz attack. Mr. Thacker has innumerable stab wounds in the chest, more than sufficient to kill him.
My judge, we have another victim.
It's not a coincidence. There's no such thing as coincidence. Louisville Metro homicide detective Lee Maroney has 2 homicide victims in the same night. Both have been brutally stabbed in the same manner.
It's not uncommon to have 2 murders in the same night, but it is uncommon to have them in such close proximity and the victims to be very good friends and to have similar lifestyle. Both Eddie and Blaine were gay men in the restaurant industry.
So we have a multiple victim homicide case and 2 separate events, not in custody and not even identified.
I mean, if he killed 2, were there other bodies elsewhere? It really made us very concerned for the safety of other people in the city. And so it really kind of kicked up our case to a different level. We had to get this guy.
Alrighty.
Detective Maroney gets a call from her partner that he would like Maroney to speak to.
You got this?
Yeah.
So she immediately goes back to the scene.
Hey, Sarge. This guy says he's looking for a friend of his.
The subject's name was Charles Mullins, in the apartment with Eddie Pointer.
This is a shock to Maroney, because as far as she knows, Eddie Pointer was the only person living in this place. Who's your friend?
He identified his friend as someone he grew up with in Ashland, Kentucky, and his name was Dale Moneypenny. He stated that Dale had a friend or a girlfriend that was also there named Jennifer Smith.
He says he just met that girl, Jennifer. I don't know her very well. She goes to college, I think.
I heard about the fire. Are they okay?
Well, if they weren't in there.
Hey, Sarge, you got a second?
Yeah. Hey, do you mind finishing up?
The arson investigator came out, said, hey, we were going through some of the debris in the house, it or not, but it has a name in it, Jennifer Smith.
The same name that our witness says he believes is Moneypenny's girlfriend. So now we have some evidence that Jennifer Smith at least had some of her possessions in this apartment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now Maroney's faced with a dilemma. Who are these people? How well do they know Mr. Not home when the fire occurs? It could be either one, but we need to find them.
At that point, we know Jennifer Smith. That's it. Very common name. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Jennifer Smith isn't going to be simple to find, but Mr. Moneypenny might be. How many Moneypennies are there? Probably not many. Detective Maroney runs the name through the system, and all the lights brighten up.
We were able to pull a picture of Mr. Moneypenny. He was young, he was attractive, piercing blue eyes, but he had a criminal history. He liked to steal things. He liked to run from the police. He liked to resist arrest. He liked to assault people.
Also, they discover that he has a car registered to him.
And he's originally from Ashland. So we made notifications to the police department in Ashland, Kentucky. We did put a flag through our NCIC system that if this license plate or this vehicle is seen, we are looking for this individual. By the Louisville Metro Police Department. It was brought in for processing.
That was found abandoned on a city street in Louisville and was towed away as an abandoned motor vehicle. They still can't find Moneypenny, but they have found his car. And that car could lead him somewhere, so let's go see what's in it.
Jesus, what a mess.
Crack pipes that have been used, burned spoons, all that sort of thing. Now we have a whole new ballgame. Drug people will do anything to get their hands on drugs. Will they kill? Yeah, they will. Will they set fire to a place? Of course. No one understands what a demon you become. When you're who you were, you're not like anyone else. You will do anything. There are no limits to what you will do to get your hands on drugs or the money to purchase them. You have no sympathy, no empathy, no anything. You are driven by one thing alone, the need for drugs. It's playing Russian roulette with 5 cylinders loaded instead of 1.
The fact that the car was located empty told me that Dale either took a Greyhound bus, he stole a vehicle, or he's hooked up with a rat out of town.
Dale is in the wind, so where's Jennifer? We don't know. That common name is a complication.
Did you see this?
So this notebook has the name Jennifer Smith on it. Maroney's detectives contact the school.
Office of Admissions.
Yeah, Metro PD. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions.
Do you have a student named Jennifer Smith? Yes, we do. Does she live in Louisville, Kentucky? No, she does not.
We were ultimately able to determine that Jennifer Smith was staying with her mother over in Jeffersonville, Indiana.
So they send the local authorities and they don't find her there. So we are on the lookout in Indiana for Jennifer Smith, the elusive girlfriend of the even more elusive Mr. Moneypenny. She is, at a minimum, an important witness in this case.
Mariah Smith had reached out to another police department in Indiana, stating that she knew that the Louisville Metro Police Department was looking for her.
She goes, I want to clear my conscience. I want to make this right.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Once you get a call like that, you drop what you're doing.
Jennifer Smith is, and then set on fire. She has a boyfriend who abandoned a car filled with drug paraphernalia that she undoubtedly has been riding in. And she has now crossed a state line into Indiana to get away from all of this.
Why don't you start by telling me about your relationship with Dale Moneypenny?
Jennifer explains that she initially is overwhelmed by his beauty. The Moneypenny is so pretty. And she never had a boyfriend like this before.
She'd only known him about 10 days prior to this. They kind of met like on the street, brought together by drugs and alcohol.
He told her that they're going to go on a crime spree. He's going to con people out of their money. He explains to her he has this method by which he uses his appearance in his youth to make himself attractive to homosexual men because he knows he is. What he wants is their money. And they're going to just buy drugs. They're going to be the new Bonnie and Clyde. That sounds like one hell of an idea to her.
I don't think this was her nature. She doesn't have a criminal history, but I think she just got roped into something by a guy who had some control over her.
So how did the two of you end up?
We needed a place to crash, so he let us stay with him for a few nights.
How long are you going to be in town?
They met Eddie, a very nice man, welcomed them into his home.
You got any money?
Yeah, get a drink there, buddy.
Their plan was to stay there for a couple of days, taking advantage of that situation.
So then.
So she says, blurts out, I didn't do anything to hurt that guy. I just gave him the lighter to start the fire. Really, Jennifer? Well, that makes a big difference then, doesn't it? When she says that, she has their attention.
So Dale was the one?
She wasn't aware that he was going to do that. But once everything got out of hand, she went along with it.
There's something else.
But what she says next really gets their attention.
She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, there's another person that we did the same thing to.
I didn't know he'd kill that old guy, I swear.
Well, his name is Blaine Thacker.
Jennifer Smith told us that they knew Blaine Thacker because he was a friend of Eddie's and one of his closer friends.
She said, you know, we met him, went up to his apartment, he bought us some food.
I think her thoughts were, we're going to go over here, get something to eat, figure out.
Dale and Blaine went into the back room. And Dale comes out. And he had blood on him.
What happened?
We have to go.
What?
We have to go now.
I swear I never thought he'd take things that far.
Fine. She's just being straightforward about everything that happened.
I think she knew she was in way over her head, and I got to get out of this.
She says, I didn't want to go out like Bonnie and Clyde in a hail of police gunfire, so I went back to Indiana. And where did he go? Well, he said he was going to go to Miami.
You have your suspect, and you also have Jennifer. So you got to figure out what you can do with Jennifer.
We arrested Jennifer Smith for complicity to commit murder and arson.
Jennifer Smith has given them what they want, the killer of two different people. And his name is Dale Moneypenny. Like the wolf who circles their sick and the ones who present as a victim, and they become those.
Once we heard he was going to Florida, Lee did whatever she needed to do to get him indicted.
We did notify Miami warrants for him through NCIC for the double murders. And as personal as it was for Dale to kill Eddie and Blaine, it became as personal for me to find him and make sure that justice was served.
Several weeks for someone in some other matter when they see this car driving erratically and they stop it. Dale Moneypenny is in the front seat. They run the name. He's wanted for murder. Well, hello, Dale. We've been looking.
Step out of the car, please, sir.
Criminals, when they have success committing their crime, begin to believe they're geniuses. They are all Professor Moriarty, by heaven, and there is no policeman in the world that's going to find them because they're so clever. He's in handcuffs. Shocked that he has wound up there.
My understanding is that when Dale was down in Florida, he encountered older gay male in a bar, and they subsequently went back to a hotel room, at what point Dale Moneypenny tied him up, stole his credit cards, and stole his car.
Well, there, Mr. Moneypenny is arrested for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, and he will be extradited to the state of Kentucky to answer for his crime.
Fugitive detectives went down and flew home with him.
You always feel better when you have somebody in custody, especially someone like that. It's a sense of relief, of accomplishment that you're able to catch them and get them locked up and off the streets.
Immediately after getting off the plane, they brought him to the homicide office, and we were ready, and we began an interview with him. I remember looking at him and just thinking, you know, he's just a kid. He did not ask for an attorney. He agreed to running.
All right, Dale. We aren't here to judge you. We just want to know the truth.
You know, as a female detective, a lot of times you appear to the younger suspects as a motherly type figure, and you're easier to talk to for them, especially about horrible things that they've done. It worked in this case.
Yeah, I can tell you what I...
Eddie.
Dale said that he needed a place to stay. Eddie opened his home to Mr. Moneypenny and allowed him and Jennifer to stay there. Moneypenny used his good looks and his charm to manipulate Eddie into giving him what he needed or wanted.
Dale, I can't have you guys freeloading here anymore.
And now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he said he was kicking us out.
Eddie had told him that he and Jennifer were no longer going to be able to stay in his house and that they were going to have to find another place to live. and that set him into a rage.
Do you understand me?
No, he was so outraged that he turned around and killed him.
His rubber band breaks. Something in his head comes unplugged. What is that? I have no idea, but it does. And when it does, he is a raving banshee with a knife. Dale now comes back out of the ether of his rage and realizes this mess he's created. How are you going to stop the police from finding this? And he comes up with a genius idea of burning it down. He gathers up clothing around the room and paper.
Give me a lighter.
Starts a series of small fires, assuming it will ignite the place. He's right, it does. Evolve, and they run.
So then we need someplace to stay.
And then they said, what are we going to do now?
So they wander off to another place where they've been, which is Blaine Thacker's house. Blaine takes them in because he's a nice man.
Dale just took matters into his own hands, knew that he needed financial resources to either get out of town or get where he needed to go, and killed Mr. Thacker and then stole from him as well.
Was that you and Jennifer's plan all along?
Nah. She didn't know any of it.
And confirmed her statements that her responsibility was not as great as his. Jennifer Smith decided to plead guilty to avoid trial, and her sentence was a 10-year sentence to serve.
Dale pleads guilty, and he's sentenced to life in prison. What are criminals? I'm sure he tells them he lives in a gated community. You know, like a prison. Good Lord.
He may have pled guilty just to avoid the death penalty, but he's showed no remorse or nothing for these victims. He could care less.
Oh, that there's ever really justice. I mean, it's not going to bring Blaine back. It's not going to bring Eddie back. And their lives were cut short for what?
These guys couldn't have been more innocent a victim as they get. I just think they were victims of opportunity and victims of opening their home to the wrong person. I think Dale was a charm and what that could do for him.
Moneypenny inserts himself into people's lives. He's like a tick. He crawls on the surface of your skin and buries himself in it. He endears himself to you. He uses every ploy with your affection, and eventually he determines what you have that he might want. And if you resist that happening, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to die.
It's mind-boggling that a human being could do something like that to another human being. Thank goodness for law enforcement and people that are able to.
Detective Maroney used her instincts and her training to resolve the death of two people, to put someone responsible for that in a can where he belongs. That's the effort shown by all homicide detectives, to stand in the shoes of the victim because they can't anymore, and to give punishment for those that took that victim away.
Street. Flavel sighed, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and picked up the mic. This is Flavel. I'm on my way. End of the Greenville Severing. The Greenville fragments, based on true events, the black plastic, The dawn in Greenville, South Carolina, usually brought a humid peace, the kind of stillness that clings to the skin before the sun burns it away. For Sue Bostic, that morning was supposed to be rhythmic, predictable, coffee, the hum of the refrigerator, the early light filtering through the blinds. But the rhythm broke the moment she opened her front door. It sat there with a malignant purpose, a black trash bag. It wasn't large, not the kind you fill with yard clippings or the debris of a spring clean. It was compact, heavy with gravity, sitting dead center on her welcome mat. It looked less like refuse and more like an offering. Sue frowned, the sleep clearing from her eyes. She scanned the street. The suburban silence was unbroken. No garbage truck rumbling in the distance, no neighbors dragging bins to the curb, just the bag. And then, the note on her car. She stepped off the porch, the concrete cool under her slippers, and pulled the piece of paper from under the windshield wiper. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, yet deliberate. It was addressed to a name that made her stomach tighten. Grace. The fear didn't hit her like a wave. It seeped in like cold water. She looked back at the bag on the porch. The innocuous black plastic suddenly seemed to pulse. Instinct, ancient and screaming, told her not to touch it. It told her that whatever was inside was not meant to be seen, and once seen, could never be forgotten. She retreated inside, her hands trembling as she dialed 3 numbers. 911. What is your emergency? I need to talk to someone, Sue whispered, staring through the peephole at the black shape on her doorstep. There's a bag on my door and a threatening note on my car. Chapter 1. The Keeper of Secrets. Detective Collis Flavel was a man etched by the job. 19 years in investigations, 16 of them wading through the crimson tide of homicide, had turned his eyes into scanners that stripped away the surface of the world to see the machinery of violence underneath. He believed in a simple, terrifying truth. Murder is a spectrum. There are crimes of passion, crimes of greed, and then there are crimes of evil. He was drinking his first cup of coffee when the call came in. The radio chatter was usually background noise, a static lullaby for the precinct, but the tone in Officer Odom's voice cut through the air. Detective, you need to come to the scene now. Flavel drove to the Bostic residence, the city of Greenville passing by in a blur of normalcy. People walking dogs, commuters rushing to work. None of them knew that the fabric of their reality had just been torn open on a quiet porch. When he arrived, Officer Odom was standing by his patrol car. His face, usually stoic, held a shade of pallor that Flavel recognized instantly. It was the look of a man who had seen something that defied the logic of the living. "What do we have, Scott?" Flavel asked, stepping out of his unmarked car. Odom didn't speak. He simply gestured to the bag now secured as evidence. "Amber, you need to see this." Flavel pulled on a pair of latex gloves. The snap of the rubber was the only sound in the oppressive morning air. He approached the bag. He peeled back the plastic layers, preparing himself for drugs, for a dead animal, for a bomb. He was not prepared for the anatomy of a nightmare. Inside, resting against the plastic, were toes. Not plastic, not props, human toes severed clean. Next to them, a hand, a foot. The air left Flavel's lungs. He had seen death in all its forms: bullet wounds, blunt force, strangulation. But this was different. The cuts were clinical. There was no rage in the severance, only a chilling precision. The skin was brown, the cuts almost surgical, lacking the jagged tearing of a frenzied attack. There was very little blood in the bag, which meant the violence had happened elsewhere. This porch was just a stage. "My God," Odom whispered. Flavel stood up, his mind shifting gears from shock to analysis. "This is a message," he said, his voice low. "Someone is hacking up a human body, forcefully removing toes, cleaving a foot at the ankle. For what? To make a point?" He looked at the house, then at the note. Who is Grace? Flavel asked. And where is the rest of this woman? Chapter 2. Echoes in the city. The investigation fractured immediately. Flavel wasn't just hunting a killer, he was hunting a ghost named Grace and a victim who had been reduced to parts. The note was the first key. It was a manifesto of madness addressed to Grace Davis. Sue Bostic was Grace's aunt. The message was implicit and terrifying. Do what we demand or you will end up like this. But there was a breadcrumb. At the bottom of the chaotic scrawl, there was an email address, a digital fingerprint in an analog crime. Get this to the lab, Flavel ordered, handing the note to forensics. I want prints, I want DNA, and I want to know who is behind that email. Before the team could even process the horror at the Bostic residence, the radio crackled again. Detective Flavel. We have a second location. Flavel closed his eyes for a brief second. Multiplication. The cancer was spreading. The second house belonged to Judon Burnside. Judon was Grace Davis's mother. The pattern was identical. A black trash bag, a suburban porch, a family connection to the elusive Grace. Flavel arrived at the second scene with a heavy dread settling in his gut. He didn't need to look inside the second bag to know what was there, but procedure demanded it. More parts. The puzzle of a human being was being delivered piece by piece to the people who loved Grace Davis. I hope the victim had died at this point, Flavel murmured to his partner, staring at the sealed evidence bag. I hope they didn't feel this. He sat down with Judon Burnside and Sue Bostic. The two women were paralyzed by a specific kind of terror, the fear for a wayward child. Where is she? Flavel asked gently. Where is Grace? Judon wept, a sound of deep maternal exhaustion. We don't know. She used to live with us, but drugs, the streets. She lost custody of her children. We're raising them now. Grace drifted away. We haven't seen her in weeks. Does she have enemies? Grace has problems, Sue said. But enemies like this? Who does this? Did anything unusual happen recently? Sue hesitated. A few days ago, the phone rang. When I picked it up, it sounded like someone was screaming. Just screaming? And then the line went dead. Flavel's jaw tightened. The timeline was contracting. The screaming woman on the phone, the bags, the silence from Grace. We need to find Grace's ex-husband, Flavel said, standing up. Money, sex, or revenge. Those are the three reasons people kill. Grace's ex owes child support. That's money and revenge wrapped in one. Chapter 3. The Identity of the Lost. The ex-husband was a dead end, a solid alibi, a new girlfriend, a verified work record. He was a man trying to move on, not a butcher. Flavel crossed him off the list with a mix of frustration and relief. It would have been too easy. The breakthrough came from the morgue, not the street. The medical examiner, a woman who had seen the worst of humanity and remained unfazed, looked troubled when Flavel entered the sterile, cold room. It's a female, she said, gesturing to the remains covered by a sheet. We ran the prints from the severed hand, and her name is McCole Harris, 34 years old. Flavel stared at the name written on the file. McCole Harris. It wasn't Grace Davis. Who is she? Flavel asked. What is her connection to Grace? That's the mystery, detective. As far as we can tell, none. Flavel felt a chill. If McCole Harris had no connection to Grace Davis, then she was a proxy. An innocent pawn sacrificed to send a message to someone else. The evil of the act suddenly deepened. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of utility. Someone had killed a mother, a daughter, a human being, just to use her body parts as stationery for a threat. Flavel took the task that every detective dreads, the notification. He found McCole's mother, Mrs. Harris, in a modest home filled with photographs of a smiling young woman. McCole had been the baby of the family, the one with the heart of gold, who had stumbled, fallen into the trap of addiction, but was trying to climb out. She told me she was coming home, Mrs. Harris said, her voice trembling as she clutched a photo of McCole. She said she was getting her life together. She wanted to see her kids. Flavel listened, his heart heavy. He couldn't tell this mother that he had only found parts of her daughter. He told her she was gone. He absorbed the scream, the wailing, the collapse of a family's universe. It was fuel. It was the coal he shoveled into the furnace of his determination. I will find who did this, he promised. It was a promise he intended to keep, even if he had to burn the city down to do it. Chapter 4. The Red Herrings and the Reek of Death. The investigation turned into a hunt for two women. The victim, McCole Harris, to retrace her last steps, and the target, Grace Davis, to understand the motive. McCole was a ghost on the streets. She frequented labor finders, a day labor spot where the desperate went for quick cash. Flavel hit the pavement, showing her picture, eyes averted. Shrugs. The code of the street was silence, and McCole had slipped through the cracks. Then, a lead. A tip came in about Grace Davis. She was staying with a cousin in the county. Flavel drove out, adrenaline spiking. If he found Grace, he found the key. Grace Davis looked worn, her edges frayed by a hard life, but she was alive. When Flavel told her about the body parts on her mother's porch, her face drained of color. Body parts? For me? Addressed to you, Grace. Do you know McCole Harris? Grace shook her head, her confusion genuine. I've never heard that name. I swear. Flavel believed her. She was terrified, not guilty. Who hates you, Grace? Who wants to control you this badly? She had no answer. The tension in Greenville was pulling tight. The media had caught wind of the body parts killer. The city held its breath. Then a call from patrol. Detective, Nickeltown area. Residents are complaining of a smell, a bad one. Flavel arrived at a small, dilapidated house. The odor hit him 20 feet away, the sweet, cloying, unmistakable scent of advanced decomposition. It was the smell of death. In the backyard, a large blue storage container sat baking in the sun. Flies buzzed around the rim in a black halo. Open it, Flavel ordered, stepping back. The officers pried the lid off. The stench rolled out like a physical blow. Inside was a slurry of blood, flesh, and liquid. A soup of biological matter. Is this the rest of McCole Harris? Flavel thought, bile rising in his throat. A woman stepped out onto the back porch, wiping her hands on a rag. What are y'all doing with my container? Flavel turned, hand resting near his holster. Ma'am, what is in this barrel? It's the pig, she said, annoyed. We had a pig picking. We cleaned the hog and put the slop in the barrel. I haven't got around to dumping it yet. Flavel stared at her. He looked at the barrel. A pig. Forensics arrived. They tested the slurry. Animal blood. Porcine DNA. It was a pig. Flavel walked away, rubbing his temples. The highs and lows of homicide were enough to break a man. He had thought he found the body. Instead, he found a rotting hog and a dead end. He needed a win. He needed the digital ghost. Chapter 5. The library tape. The email address from the note. Computer forensics finally cracked it. The email hadn't been sent from a smartphone or a home computer. It was sent from a public terminal at the Greenville Public Library. Flavel stood in the quiet hum of the library, surrounded by books and the smell of old paper. I need the security footage, he told the librarian. April 7th, Station 4. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Flavel watched the monitor. He saw a man and a woman walk into the frame. They were African American. The woman was not Grace Davis. The man was large, imposing. But it was the man's hands that caught Flavel's eye. Pause it there, Flavel commanded. On the screen, the man was typing on the library keyboard. In the middle of April, inside a climate-controlled building, he was wearing thick, heavy winter gloves. He doesn't want to leave prints, Flavel muttered. Smart enough to wear gloves, stupid enough to do it on camera. He printed the still frame. He had the faces of his killers. Now, he just needed names. Chapter 6. The Triangle of Doom. Flavel brought the photo to Grace Davis. Grace, he said, sliding the picture across the interrogation table, I need you to be honest. No more games. Who are these people? Grace looked at the photo and gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. That's Carmen, she whispered. And Clarence Jenkins. Talk to me, Grace. The dam broke. Grace told a story of a twisted domestic arrangement. She had been homeless, desperate. Clarence and Carmen Jenkins, a married couple living in a trailer, had taken her in. But it wasn't charity. It was a triad. We were together, Grace said, looking down. All three of us. We were in love. Or I thought we were. We even talked about getting married. The three of us. Why did you leave? Clarence, she shuddered. He's controlling. He's the devil, detective. He owns you. He got abusive. He wouldn't let us leave the house. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran away on March 16th. Flavel did the math. Grace runs away in mid-March. The body parts show up in early April. Clarence Jenkins didn't want Grace to move on. He wanted her back. And he was willing to burn the world down to get her. Chapter 7, The House of Horrors. Flavel didn't wait. He found a traffic warrant for Clarence Jenkins, a stroke of luck, a bureaucratic key to open the door. He assembled a team and headed to the Jenkins residence. It was a trailer, sagging and weary, sitting on a plot of land that looked abandoned. As they approached, a surveillance team radioed in. Detective, we just saw the couple carrying black trash bags to the dumpster. They're dumping evidence. Flavel's eyes narrowed. Get those bags, now. In the dumpster, they found empty bleach bottles, scrub brushes, the tools of a desperate cleanup. Flavel walked up the steps of the trailer and hammered on the door. Police! Open up, Carmen Jenkins answered. She looked tired, her eyes darting nervously. Clarence ain't here. We have a warrant, Carmen. If he's in there, you're harboring a fugitive. They pushed past her. The smell of the trailer was a mix of stale smoke, unwashed bodies, and something metallic. Copper, blood. The place was a sty, rotting food, fungus growing in pots. But amidst the filth, there were strange anomalies. The bathroom. Detective, Officer Aiken shouted from the back. Look at this. Flavel stepped into the bathroom. The shower stall had been spray painted. A thick, uneven coat of red paint covered the walls and the floor of the tub. Who paints a shower red? Flavel whispered. Someone trying to hide blood spatter. They moved to the bedroom. Knives, swords, a collection of weaponry that spoke of a fetish for steel. And on a clipboard, sitting innocently on a dresser, were drafts. Handwritten drafts of the threatening letters sent to Sue Bostic. Found him. Aiken was pointing to a loose panel in the wall. They ripped it away. Curled up in the dark recess of the wall, like a rat in a ship's hold, was Clarence Jenkins. Part 2. The Silent Year. Chapter 8. The Standoff. The arrest was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a different kind of war. One fought not with guns or warrants, but with patience and silence. Clarence Jenkins sat in the county jail, a monolith of defiance. He was a man who thrived on control, and even behind bars, he believed he held the ultimate card, the location of McCole Harris's body. Without a body, he reasoned, the murder charge was a ghost. They had blood, they had letters, they had a painted shower. But in the twisted logic of a killer, no body meant no crime. Detective Flavel visited him once, early in the confinement. Tell us where she is, Clarence, Flavel said, sitting across the metal table. Give the family some peace. Clarence leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. I don't know what you're talking about, Detective. I'm just a man who likes to paint his bathroom. We found the drafts of the letters, Clarence. We have the video of you in the library. Circumstantial, Clarence said, savoring the word. You have parts. You don't have a murder. Flavel left the room with a clenched jaw. He knew Clarence was enjoying this. The pain of the Harris family was food to him. Meanwhile, Carmen Jenkins was held in the women's detention center. She was quieter, more brittle. Flavel sensed she was the weak link. But the bond of the triad, the psychological hold Clarence had over her, was forged in iron. She was terrified of him, even with concrete walls separating them. She believed his reach was infinite. Months dragged into seasons. Summer burned into a crisp autumn, and then a bleak winter settled over Greenville. The case grew cold in the public eye, but it burned hot in Flavel's mind. Every day that passed was another day McCole Harris lay alone in the dark, unburied and unmourned. Flavel kept the pressure on. He visited Carmen's attorneys. He dropped hints about Clarence's behavior in jail, how he was posturing, how he might be setting Carmen up to take the fall alone. He's going to trade you, Carmen, Flavel told her attorney to pass along. When the time comes, he will cut her loose to save himself. That's what controlling men do. It was a seed. Flavel watered it with silence. He let her sit in the cell, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the man she worshipped was really a god or just a devil in disguise. A year passed. A year of holidays missed. A year of Mrs. Harris setting a place at the table that would never be filled. Then the crack appeared. Chapter 9, The Fracture. It happened on a Tuesday, indistinguishable from the hundreds before it. Carmen sent word. She wanted a meeting. Flavel arrived at the solicitor's office, his heart hammering a cautious rhythm. He had been here before with other suspects who promised the moon and delivered dust. But when he saw Carmen, he knew this was different. The year had eroded her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. She looked like a woman who had woken up from a long, feverish nightmare, only to find reality was worse. "I can't do it anymore," she whispered, her hands trembling on the table. He sends messages through other inmates. He tells me to hold on. He says we're winning. "You aren't winning, Carmen," Flavel said softly. "You're rotting." "And for what? For a man who cut off a woman's feet to prove a point?" Carmen flinched. The image seemed to hit her physically. "I want to make a deal," she said. "I want the truth," Flavel countered. "All of it. And I want McCole. I can give you the map," she said, tears finally spilling over. "I can tell you where we took her." And so the dam broke. Carmen told the story of the abduction, the failed strangulation, the machete, the garden shears. She spoke of the night they drove to the vacant field, the smell of gasoline, the fire that wouldn't catch properly because the wood was too damp. She described a monster. And in doing so, she finally stepped out of his shadow. Chapter 10, The Harvest of Bones. The directions Carmen gave were specific, yet time had been cruel to the landscape. The vacant field she described had been overgrown, changed by seasons and weather. Flavel organized a massive search and rescue teams, cadaver dogs, and lines of officers walking shoulder to shoulder through the tall grass. The atmosphere was heavy, not just with the heat, but with the solemn weight of the task. They weren't looking for a survivor. They were looking for closure. "Anything?" Flavel called out, wiping sweat from his brow. "The dogs are alerting," a handler shouted from near a cluster of scrub oak. Flavel ran over. The dog was sitting, whining softly, nose pointed at a depression in the earth. It wasn't a grave, not really. It was a dump site. Nature had done its work, but the evidence remained. Charred fragments, bone, and there, glinting in the dirt, the metal teeth of a pair of garden loppers. The very tool Carmen had described. "Secure the perimeter," Flavel ordered, his voice cracking slightly. "We found her. We're bringing her home." It wasn't the homecoming Mrs. Harris had dreamed of. It was a collection of fragments in evidence bags. But it was proof. It was the final nail in Clarence Jenkins' coffin. When Flavel returned to the station, he felt a strange lightness. The ghost was no longer a ghost. McCole Harris was no longer a theory. She was a case, solved and ready for judgment. Part 3, Judgment. Chapter 11. The Devil in the Dock. The trial of Clarence Jenkins was a spectacle of the macabre. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with the murmurs of a community that had lived in fear of the body parts killer. Clarence entered the court not as a broken man, but with his head held high. He wore a suit that didn't fit quite right, but his demeanor was that of a king in exile. He refused to look at the gallery. He refused to look at the Harris family. The prosecution laid out the case like a master architect. The DNA on the letters, the video from the library, the painted shower, and finally, the testimony of Carmen Jenkins. When Carmen took the stand, Clarence finally looked. He stared at her with an intensity that made the jurors shift uncomfortably. It was a look of pure, concentrated hatred. "He told me to do it," Carmen said, her voice small but clear in the silent room. "He said if I loved him, I would help him get Grace back. He said McCole was just a vessel." "A vessel?" the prosecutor asked. "A message," she corrected. "He didn't see her as a person. She was just parts to him." The jury recoiled. The brutality of the statement hung in the air. Clarence's defense tried to paint Carmen as the mastermind, the jealous lover who killed a rival. But the physical evidence, the strength required to sever limbs, the sheer brutality pointed to Clarence. And the garden loppers found with the body bore traces that linked back to the trailer. Chapter 12. The Verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up, avoiding Clarence's gaze. "We find the defendant, Clarence Jenkins, guilty of murder in the first degree, guilty of desecration of a corpse, guilty of kidnapping." Clarence didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He simply blinked, as if processing a minor inconvenience. The judge, a woman known for her composure, looked down at Clarence over her glasses. "Mr. Jenkins, in my years on the bench, I have seen many tragic things, but I have rarely seen such a complete absence of humanity. You are a danger not just to the people you target, but to the very concept of society." She sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carmen Jenkins, for her cooperation and her plea, received 40 years. It was a heavy sentence, but it was a life sentence with an end date, unlike Clarence's. Epilogue. The river of time. The courthouse emptied, the cameras packed up, and the city of Greenville moved on. That is the way of the world. Horror fades, replaced by the mundane struggles of daily life. But for Detective Collis Flavel, the case never truly vanished. It became a scar on his memory, faded, but sensitive to the touch. He stood by his car, lighting a cigarette he swore he would quit. He watched Mrs. Harris walk down the courthouse steps. She was holding a small urn. It wasn't much. It wasn't the daughter who laughed and made mistakes and loved her children, but it was what was left. "Detective?" she said, stopping beside him. "Mrs. Harris, thank you," she said, "for not giving up, for finding the rest of her." "I'm sorry it took so long," Flavel said. "I'm sorry we couldn't save her." "You saved the truth," she said. "That matters." She walked away, a small figure against the backdrop of the massive stone building. Flavel watched her go. He thought about evil. He thought about how it could hide in plain sight, in a library, in a trailer, in a black trash bag on a suburban porch. He thought about the rare breed it took to catch the dead. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his heel. "Rest in peace, McCole," he whispered to the wind. He got into his car and turned the key. The radio crackled to life. "Unit 402, we have a 10 to 54 on Main, possible homicide." "This is Flavel," he said, shifting the car into drive. "I'm on my way." The end. Author's note. The narrative has been expanded to include Part 2 and Part 3, detailing the year-long investigation gap, the discovery of the remains, and the trial, providing a comprehensive, novelistic conclusion to the body parts case. The Scraps of Contempt. Chapter 1. The Offering at the Door. The air in Greenville, South Carolina, was already thick with the wet, smothering promise of a humid May. It pressed down on the city, holding the smells close, the sweetness of blooming honeysuckle, the faint metallic exhaust from the nearby interstate, and now, for Sue Bostic, a new, sharp, and profoundly wrong aroma. Sue Bostic was a woman of fastidious habits and concrete expectations. Her life was an exercise in order, spreadsheets balanced to the penny, meals planned a week in advance, and a front porch swept every morning at 7:05 a.m. It was 7:15 a.m. when the bag violated that order. It was not a crumpled paper bag, abandoned by a morning jogger. It was a standard black plastic garbage bag, industrial grade, and it sat with an unnerving, deliberate stillness directly in the center of her small, immaculate front porch. It had not fallen there, it had been placed. It was perfectly centered, a grotesque, opaque monument to something profoundly malevolent. Sue's fingers, steady enough to manage the volatile finances of a mid-sized accounting firm, trembled as she retreated a step. She was a practical woman, not prone to superstition, but the bag felt less like garbage and more like a landmine. I'm calling 911. What is your emergency? There's a bag on my door, and I got a threatened note on my car. Sue Bostic managed, her voice fracturing. I don't know what's in it, and I don't want to touch it. She paused, dragging a shaky breath through her lungs. Please send an officer, now. She hung up, her gaze snapping back to her sedan parked neatly at the curb. The note was secured under the driver's side windshield wiper, a cheap slip of paper that bowed slightly in the morning breeze. Its placement was a calculated trespass, a violation of the private, sacred space of her life. She could read the typed words from her distance. This is what happens if you don't follow instructions. The horror was not in the object itself, but in the realization that someone had been here. Someone had stood on her porch, placed the offering, and pinned the threat, all while she slept. Her order was shattered. The detective's arrival. Detective Collis Flavel pulled up to the curb minutes later, the flashing lights of the patrol cars already painting the quiet street in jarring blue and red strobes. Flavel, at 52, was a study in controlled exhaustion. His face was etched with the maps of 19 years in investigations, 16 of them devoted to the darkest corners of homicide. He moved with a heavy, practiced weariness, the kind that only comes from staring too long into the void. He spotted Officer Odom and Officer Drummond standing near the patrol car, a palpable tension radiating off them. The black bag, now resting on the vehicle's trunk, dominated the scene. Drummond, Odom, what are we looking at here? Flavel's voice was a low, rumbling baritone, the sound of professional inquiry, masking a deeper, weary anticipation. Officer Odom, a young man who still wrestled with the inherent cruelty of the world, swallowed hard. Detective, you need to see this. We haven't moved anything, just opened it a crack to confirm. Flavel nodded curtly and knelt by the trunk. Odom gently unfolded the top of the plastic, revealing the contents. A shallow, disturbed bed of shredded paper and, nestled within it, objects that were so profoundly organic, so undeniably human, that they stole the breath. The initial shock was not the sheer quantity of blood. There was surprisingly little, but the cold, dispassionate nature of the act. There was a severed hand and a severed foot. They were a deep, mottled brown, suggesting they had been refrigerated or at least preserved for some time. They had been removed with shocking precision. Not hacked in a blind frenzy, they were cleaved a clean, violent, yet remarkably surgical cut at the ankle and wrist. Flavel's clinical brain engaged, shutting off the human response. He was looking at a puzzle piece, not a remnant of a person. Scott, are these toes? Flavel asked, pointing to a smaller cluster of objects. Odom confirmed the grim detail. 10 toes, detached from the foot itself, nestled next to the hand like grim, misplaced marbles. They were separated from the main appendages with the same eerie, meticulous skill. Someone is using a blade, not an axe, Flavel stated, rising slowly. The horror was in the deliberation. Someone did this somewhere else, and they took their time cleaning up. This wasn't a spontaneous act. The severed pieces were a statement of extreme violence and cold intent, a declaration designed not just to threaten, but to shatter the recipient's psychological safety. We need the ME here, and forensics, and every available unit to start a canvass of the neighborhood, looking for anything out of place in the early hours. Flavel rubbed the stubble on his chin. And I need to see that note now. The demands of the note. Drummond handed him the note in a clear evidence bag. Flavel studied the typed block of text. Every letter an arrow aimed at a specific target. Grace? This is what happens if you don't follow instructions. We know where they live. We know who they love. Your refusal has already cost someone dearly. If you wish to stop the rest of this tragedy, respond to this email address within 24 hours. shadow.player@hushmail.com. No police. No exceptions. Grace, Flavel read aloud, tasting the name. Miss Bostic, who is Grace Davis? Sue Bostic, leaning heavily against her porch railing, looked utterly defeated. That's my niece. She used to live here, but she got into drugs. We had to take her children. They live with us now, me and my husband. Grace. She's drifted off into the streets. Flavel absorbed the tragic backstory. A mother lost to addiction, her children being raised by the dutiful aunt. And now, the aunt's house was the target. The threat was clear. You left. You think you're safe? Look at what I can do to the people who took your place. The patrol car radio crackled, the static suddenly sounding like a heartbeat skipping a beat. Flavel, we've got a problem. Another bag has been located. Address is 1412 Laurel Lane. Additional body parts? Detective. Same description. Flavel grabbed the mic, his professional wariness replaced by a sudden, cold urgency. Laurel Lane, he confirmed, his voice a tight wire. Is that Judon Burnside? Odom, who had been listening, nodded grimly. Yes, sir, that's Grace's mother. They weren't just threatening Grace's emotional life. They were meticulously attacking her through the entire support system she had abandoned. Her aunt and her mother, the two women who had stepped up to protect her children, were now the recipients of this escalating, sadistic display. This wasn't just extortion. This was a deliberate campaign of terror. The second scene and the ex-husband. At the second scene on Laurel Lane, the same horrific tableau was presented. Another black bag, placed with the same calculated malevolence. This time, outside the more modest, slightly run-down door of Judon Burnside. Flavel found Judon Burnside and Sue Bostic huddled together in the back of a police cruiser, insulated from the second scene by the crime scene tape. Two women united by blood, worry, and a shared, deepening dread for the daughter and niece who had slipped away. Mrs. Burnside, Miss Bostic, thank you for staying with us, Flavel began, his tone gentle but direct. We need to talk about enemies. Anyone Grace was involved with who might harbor this kind of malice? A relationship gone bad? A serious debt? Judon, Grace's mother, was older, harder-edged, a woman whose face carried the permanent strain of past disappointments. Months. She's drifted. She got into pills, then something heavier. We had to take the kids. She gripped the crucifix hanging from her neck. Drug debts. That's the only thing that makes sense. Only her ex, David, Judon finally offered. He was ordered to pay child support, $400 a month. He hated that. They fought constantly. Money, revenge, the common denominators. Flavel knew that for a threat this complex, this gruesome, the motive was likely far darker than a simple child support dispute. But procedural work demanded he follow every trail. Did he ever threaten Grace or any of you? He said he'd make her pay, Sue interjected. That she'd regret dragging him into court. But this? Sue gestured vaguely toward the crime tape, encompassing the monstrous act. David's a jerk. He's not this. Flavel, however, needed to eliminate the simplest explanation first. They tracked down David, Grace's ex-husband, a mechanic working out of a noisy garage on the edge of town. He was loud, defensive, and immediately suspicious. I hate that junkie, David admitted, wiping grease on his overalls. She ran off, dumped the kids, and I'm the one stuck paying for her habit? Yeah, I wanted revenge. But I ain't chopping nobody up. I got a girlfriend now, detective, a real woman. I was with her, same as every morning, getting ready for work. David's alibi, backed up by his new girlfriend, was quickly verified. He had been with her during the crucial hours the bags were placed, and his work record confirmed his presence at the garage shortly after. It's a shame. It would make this case a lot simpler, but it's not simple. Flavel pushed the ex-husband aside. The killer was still out there, hiding in the shadows of a more complex pathology. The identity shift. The medical examiner's initial report from the crime lab reached Flavel late that afternoon. The forensic team, led by a tired but determined specialist, had successfully lifted a partial, clean fingerprint from the severed hand. The subsequent automated search of the APHIS database provided a match. Flavel stood in the empty briefing room, staring at the screen. The name that came back was not Grace Davis. It was Nicole Harris, age 34. The case narrative disintegrated. The killer had not targeted Grace's own body. They had selected a complete, apparently random proxy. They had murdered Nicole Harris, an unknown woman, and used her severed body parts as a brutal, theatrical message aimed at Grace Davis. The depth of the malice, the willingness to kill an innocent stranger just to send a message was staggering. Who the hell is Nicole Harris? Flavel muttered, rubbing his eyes. And what is her connection to Grace Davis, or to the shadow player who sent this monstrosity? Flavel ordered a full profile on Nicole Harris. He learned she was a 3-4-year-old mother from a town a few hours away, a woman who had, like Grace, fallen on hard times due to a drug habit. She had lost custody of her children, but her sister insisted that she was turning her life around, working day labor jobs through the local labor finders. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he called her family. A death notification is always difficult, but explaining that their daughter was murdered, dismembered, and her remains used in a sick game was a new low. He only has parts of her, Flavel thought. The cold truth of the situation, a physical weight. How do you tell a mother that? He found Nicole's mother, a woman named Mrs. Henderson, a woman of deep faith and deeper grief. Mika was my baby. Mrs. Henderson wept into the phone. She was trying, detective. She was working towards getting her life together and coming home. She didn't deserve to go like this. Flavel promised her justice, knowing the promise was inadequate against the scale of the horror. The second clue, the smell of death. The manhunt for Nicole Harris's remaining body parts began with the full force of the Greenville PD. The entire city was placed on edge, a dismembered body, a killer on the loose, and a threat hanging over the head of an unknown woman named Grace. Days later, a call came in from the Nickeltown area, a neighborhood known for its industrial yards and lower-income housing. The complaint? A foul odor. 2 patrol officers, responding to the mundane call, drove down a back alley and were immediately overcome. It was the distinct, unforgettable smell of death, an unbearable, heavy stench that clung to the throat. It led them straight to a metal storage container behind a dilapidated house. The officers donned masks and lifted the lid. The sight was immediately and overwhelmingly repulsive. A thick, viscous sludge of blood and rotting flesh, filling the container almost to the top. "We found her," one officer rasped into his radio, his voice strained by disgust and relief. Flavel arrived, the metallic reek hitting him instantly. He was already directing the forensics team when a woman, gaunt and suspicious, emerged from the back door of the house. "What are you all doing?" she demanded, her arms crossed. "Ma'am, we're investigating a crime scene," Flavel said, his eyes narrowing. "Did you kill McCole Harris?" "A crime scene? Y'all are investigating the death of a pig," she announced, a strange note of indignation in her voice. "We had a pig picking, and we cleaned the pig right there. I just put the leftovers in that container." Flavel stared at the container, then at the woman. It was a bizarre yet plausible explanation. Greenville was in the South. Pig pickings were common. Forensics, Flavel instructed, not moving his gaze from the container. Immediate testing on the contents. I want a definitive identification of the species. An hour later, the forensic specialist gave the report. "It's definitely pig, detective. We're dealing with the remnants of a very poorly cleaned barbecue." The crushing disappointment was immediate. Another promising lead dissolved into thin air. Flavel knew the drill. You pick the wrong rabbit hole, you pull yourself out, and you find the next one. All right, pack it up. Back to the drawing board. The man in the gloves? The drawing board was simple. The email address, shadow.player@hushmail.com. Flavel had submitted the note for digital analysis immediately. Computer forensics now had a result. The email had been checked, and the threatening note had been drafted using a public computer at the main branch of the Greenville County Library. They had the precise date and time. April 7th, 10:15 a.m. Flavel was at the library manager's desk within the hour, securing the surveillance footage. The cameras were public, prominent, and reliable. The video revealed an African-American couple, a man and a woman, at the specific computer station at the exact time. The woman was not Grace Davis, but the couple had the air of perpetrators caught on tape. What struck Flavel immediately was the man. He was wearing thick, dark leather gloves inside the library. "He's using a public terminal," Flavel observed, pointing at the screen. "A computer that doesn't trace back to him. He's masking his identity by using a disposable email and a public machine. But he's wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints on the keyboard." It was a perfect contradiction, the calculation of a criminal who understood digital anonymity paired with the paranoia of one who feared leaving physical evidence in the most ridiculous place. The arrogance of the killer was now a tangible thing. "These people," Flavel said, his voice hardening, "they are our killers. Now we bring in Grace Davis. It's time to stop playing games." He knew he had to crack Grace. The women on the tape were not random. They were the architects of McCole Harris's murder and the source of the campaign of terror. And Grace Davis, for all her fear and denials, was the only key left to unlock the identity of the man in the gloves and the woman who helped him plot the most contemptible proxy murder Flavel had ever encountered. The game was about to enter its final, brutal stage. End of Chapter 1. The Scraps of Contempt. Chapter 2. The Triangle of Contempt. The interview room was Spartan. A steel table, 3 uncomfortable plastic chairs bolted to the floor, and the unblinking eye of a wall camera. Grace Davis sat opposite Flavel, shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on the scuffed surface of the table. Her exhaustion was profound, a physical cloak she wore, but Flavel could sense the underlying current of terror. They had brought her in under the pretense of offering her enhanced protection, but the truth was they needed a confession, or at least a name. She had refused to admit to any connections with her enemies, claiming the bags and the notes were random, drug-related malice. Flavel placed a 9x11 photo on the table between them. It was a still frame from the library security footage, a grainy image of the man in the thick, inappropriate leather gloves leaning over the keyboard. "Grace," Flavel said, his voice low, steady, and utterly devoid of judgment, the tone he reserved for pushing people past their breaking point. "I need you to start being honest with me. This is no longer a question of a drug debt or a threat. This is a murder case. Someone is dead. And we know you know who these people are. Grace didn't look up. I told you, detective. I don't know. I've been on the street. I keep to myself. No, you don't, Flavel countered, sliding a second photograph onto the table. This one, a clearer shot of the woman standing beside the gloved man. You've been living with people. People who are so invested in bringing you back that they murdered a stranger, cut her into pieces, and delivered them to your aunt and mother. He leaned in, his heavy frame imposing. I am not going to go away. We are going to find the rest of McCole Harris's body, and we are going to charge the people who did this. When we do, we need to know your connection. Tell me now, Grace. Tell me what's going on. Or you become an accomplice. The word accomplice hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Grace Davis flinched, a small, involuntary twitch of her jaw. She was terrified of the killers. But she was even more terrified of the justice system, having already lost her children to it. A long, agonizing silence stretched, broken only by the whirring of the camera. Finally, Grace cracked. Okay, look, I know them. Her voice was barely a whisper. But I don't talk to them anymore. I left them. Who is the man in the gloves, Grace? She finally lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and vacant. Clarence Jenkins. And that's his wife, Carmen. Flavel felt the familiar surge of investigative triumph quickly superseded by a deep sense of revulsion. The puzzle piece had clicked into the socket, revealing a terrifying, unexpected picture. The unraveling. Grace began to talk, the words tumbling out in a rush of shame and relief. She had fled her ex-husband, David, and after a brief, miserable stint in a women's shelter, she had met Clarence Jenkins. He had seemed like a savior, offering her a place to stay in the run-down mobile home he shared with his wife, Carmen. It was supposed to be temporary, Grace explained, clutching her trembling hands. But they were nice to me. Too nice. They fed me. They let me use some of their stuff. Flavel waited, knowing the niceness had a price. They offered me drugs. But not just that. They offered inclusion. They told me they were polyamorous. They believed in loving freely. Flavel raised an eyebrow, masking his internal reaction. A triangle situation? Yes, I started a relationship with Clarence. And then Carmen. We were all together. They talked about us being official, being a real family. They said they were going to try to get married as a throuple, somehow make it legal. Grace shuddered, the memory clearly toxic. So what went wrong? Flavel asked, knowing the stability of such arrangements was often illusory. Clarence, she spat the name out, a spark of genuine hatred replacing the fear. He wasn't romantic, he was controlling. He was verbally abusive to both of us. He said we couldn't leave the trailer, that we were his property. He would scream and break things if we talked to other people. She described a relationship that quickly spiraled from shared affection into a kind of psychological imprisonment, orchestrated by Clarence, with Carmen acting as a passive, complicit guard. I realized I was just trading one kind of cage for another, Grace whispered. A dirtier one. I just knew I had to get out. Flavel pulled out his notebook. When did you leave? March 16th. I waited until they were both asleep and I just walked away. I took nothing, just kept walking. The date was critical. Grace left on March 16th. The severed hands and feet were delivered on April 6th and 7th. McCole Harris had been murdered to punish Grace Davis for leaving the controlling orbit of Clarence Jenkins. He wanted me back, Grace murmured, confirming Flavel's terrifying hypothesis. He said, it's the three of us or none of us. He wanted me to see what happens when I defy him. He wanted me to know that running away didn't mean I was safe and that my family wouldn't be safe either. Flavel looked at the photo of the Jenkins couple, the man in the gloves, the woman by his side. They hadn't wanted revenge against Grace's aunt or mother. They wanted leverage over Grace. And they were willing to kidnap and butcher a perfect stranger, McCole Harris, as a tool to achieve it. This wasn't a crime of passion or debt. This was a crime of entitlement, the cold, psychotic belief that a human life was a disposable instrument to achieve personal desire. The rush to action. "Thank you, Grace," Flavel said, his voice flat with the weight of the new information. He knew where the threats were coming from, and more importantly, he knew they had only begun. He immediately dispatched teams to locate the Jenkins residence, a mobile home park on the outskirts of Greenville. "I want an all-hands-on-deck surveillance team there immediately," Flavel instructed his partner, Detective Aiken. "Do not approach, do not engage, just watch. And I want a judge on the line for a search warrant. Grounds are kidnapping and first-degree murder based on the motive provided by Grace Davis." Flavel spent the next 2 hours in a frenzy, writing the affidavit for the search warrant, documenting every detail, the severed parts, the fingerprint match, the library footage, the email address, and Grace's testimony connecting the suspects to the threats. As he worked, a call came through from the surveillance team leader. "Flavel, we've got eyes on the trailer, a green, single wide. And they're moving." "Moving what?" Flavel asked, pen poised over the document. "Trash bags, detective. Black, industrial grade. Same kind found at the scene. They're taking them from the back of the trailer straight to the dumpster near the entrance of the park. They look heavy." A cold jolt of dread mixed with adrenaline shot through Flavel. They weren't just moving trash, they were scrubbing the crime scene. Every second Flavel spent waiting for the judge's signature was a second lost to evidence destruction. "Get closer," Flavel ordered. "When they're done with the bags, I want 2 officers to approach that dumpster. Do not disturb the contents, but visually confirm they contain anything that looks like cleaning supplies. No touching, just visual confirmation." Minutes later, the update arrived. "Detective, the bags were tossed." 2 officers checked the contents visually. They see empty bottles of industrial bleach, cleaning solutions, and what looks like heavily soiled rags. They are actively cleaning the scene. Flavel slammed his hand on the desk, the warrant application still incomplete. This was the moment. The Jenkins were eliminating the evidence of McCole Harris's final, horrifying moments. He needed to be inside that trailer now. "It's not enough for a no-knock entry, and the warrant's not signed yet," Aiken reminded him, watching the clock tick. "We need a legal way in, Collis." Flavel stared at the image of Clarence Jenkins, the gloved man whose sheer arrogance had led him to use a library computer. Flavel leaned back, his eyes catching the light reflecting off his own desk monitor. "Clarence Jenkins," Flavel murmured, recalling the rapid background check they'd done after Grace named him. "Run the records again, Aiken. Everything, especially traffic warrants. Anything that gets us through that front door without breaking procedure." Aiken quickly typed the request. The computer system whirred for 30 seconds, the longest half-minute of Flavel's day. "Got it, detective," Aiken announced, his voice tight with surprise. "Clarence Jenkins. Outstanding warrant. Failure to appear on an unpaid parking violation from 6 weeks ago. Class C misdemeanor. Fresh off the press." Flavel finally smiled, a grim, humorless curve of his mouth. "That, Aiken, is enough. I'll meet the uniforms at the park entrance. We're going in for the parking ticket." It was ridiculous. A horrific murder, dismemberment, and campaign of psychological terror, all stopped by a $200 parking violation. But Flavel knew better than to question the small gifts of fate. It was his way into the trailer, his way into the heart of the darkness. "Get the search warrant signed and delivered as fast as humanly possible," Flavel instructed. "But for now, tell the team, we have a fugitive to arrest." The trailer park assault. Flavel and 4 uniformed officers arrived at the mobile home park. The Jenkins single-wide trailer was a sickly green, nestled between 2 much cleaner units, immediately standing out as an island of neglect. "Police, open up!" Flavel barked, pounding on the flimsy door. The door was answered by the woman from the video, Carmen Jenkins. Her face was pale, tight with controlled panic. She was African American, mid-30s, her eyes darting between Flavel's heavy face and the 4 officers lined up behind him. "Can I help you?" she asked, a sickly sweetness in her voice. "Ma'am, I have a warrant for Clarence Jenkins," Flavel stated, holding up the paperwork for the traffic violation, an absurd document in the context of the horror they knew had transpired inside. "Where is he?" Carmen, a liar to the core, barely hesitated. "Well, he ain't here right now. He left early for work." "That's fine," Flavel replied, his voice a low growl. "We're going to search the premise, and if I find him in here, I'm going to charge you with harboring a fugitive. Step aside, Carmen." The officers stormed the trailer. The smell inside was immediate, profound, and gag-inducing. Not the smell of the pig picking they had investigated earlier, but the cloying, acidic scent of stale bodily fluids, cheap air freshener, and underlying decay. The house was disgusting, even worse than Flavel had imagined. Pots on the counter contained forgotten food with green fungus blooming on the surfaces. Every available horizontal space was cluttered with filth. "No bleach was used here," Flavel muttered to himself, observing the grime. "They tried, but they missed everything." Aiken called from the back hallway. "Flavel, in the bathroom!" Flavel found Aiken staring at the shower stall. The cheap white fiberglass of the shower and the vinyl floor of the small bathroom had been hastily painted. A violent, deep red spray paint covered the surfaces. The attempt to cover the scene was as grotesque and clumsy as their original attempt to deliver the body parts. But the killers hadn't been thorough. Just above the new paint line, on the peeling wallpaper, Flavel could see undeniable, dark spatter stains. "It's blood," Flavel confirmed, his clinical eye recognizing the pattern instantly. "They killed her here, and they tried to make the crime scene disappear with a can of Krylon." Suddenly, one of the uniforms, a young man named Hedges, shouted from the back bedroom, "Detective, I got something back here." Hedges stood next to a wall, his gaze fixed on a section of cheap, thin paneling that looked slightly misaligned. The paneling was barely secured to the studs. "There's a hole, sir. Look." Hedges pointed to a crack where the drywall met the floor. Flavel knelt, pulling out his heavy-duty flashlight. He shined the bright beam into the narrow gap, piercing the darkness beyond the wall. The beam fixed on a pair of wide, terrified eyes staring back at him. Clarence Jenkins, the man who believed he could play God with human bodies to win back an ex-lover, was cowering in the narrow, filthy space between the bedroom wall and the trailer's outer shell. "Come out of there, Clarence," Flavel said, his voice flat with contempt. "You're under arrest." The killer, the man in the gloves, the architect of a proxy murder of unparalleled malice, crawled out of his miserable hiding spot like a rodent emerging from a drain, defeated by a simple parking ticket. End of Chapter 2. The Scraps of Contempt. Chapter 3. The Inventory of Evil. Clarence Jenkins offered no resistance, only a blank, simmering resentment, as the cuffs were cinched tight. He was a small man in person, not the imposing figure Flavel had imagined. The malice was all in his eyes, dull, vacant, but holding a deep well of self-pity and entitlement. Carmen, standing frozen in the doorway, was immediately placed under arrest for harboring a fugitive. "I'll take him in," Aiken confirmed, taking custody of Clarence. "You stay here. Forensics is on the way with the signed warrant. You've got a lot of cutting and swabbing ahead of you, Collis." Flavel watched the police cruiser pull away, taking the killer temporarily out of his orbit. He then turned to the mobile home, now cordoned off with fresh yellow tape. The search warrant had arrived minutes after the arrest, making their immediate entry and observations legally sound. The trailer was less a residence and more a lair, a sickening testament to the depraved existence of its occupants. The filth was not accidental. It was indicative of a mental breakdown, a contempt for life, and order that mirrored the crime itself. The forensic deep dive. The arrival of the forensics division, masked and suited, transformed the trailer into a controlled laboratory of horror. Flavel, wearing sterile gloves and booties, walked the space again, this time with a trained eye for evidence, not just initial impressions. In the kitchen, amidst the rotten food, they found a package of black garbage bags matching the exact brand and tensile strength of the bags used for the delivery. They were the cheap, industrial kind, sold in massive rolls. In the bathroom, the red paint was the star witness. The hasty, amateur attempt at covering the scene was a goldmine of mistakes. The paint, intended to mask, instead highlighted the geometry of the violence. The technicians used luminol, and the bathroom exploded into a ghostly, incandescent blue. Positive for blood, detective, the lead technician, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, confirmed, her voice muffled by her mask, everywhere. The spatter patterns on the walls, even under the peeling wallpaper, indicate high-velocity impact. And look at the floor, under the paint, where the thin layer of Krylon had cracked, dark, congealed stains were visible. The killer hadn't just cleaned up. He had tried to seal the horror under a new coat of color, a child's attempt to erase a crayon mark. Flavel moved to the bedroom, the tight, grimy space where Clarence had been hiding. This room was a chamber of secrets. On a cluttered nightstand, Detective Hedges, still processing the sheer shock of finding the killer behind a wall, pointed to a small, disturbing collection. "We found these, detective. Knives, swords, handcuffs." Flavel surveyed the display. A short, thick-bladed machete, the type used for clearing dense brush, was nestled beneath a pile of dirty clothes. The blade was dark, but a faint, rusty smear was visible near the handle. Next to it lay a pair of heavy, industrial garden shears, the kind used to clip thick branches. "The machete for the hand and foot," Flavel murmured, recalling the cleaved, clean cuts. "The shears for the toes." The simplicity of the instruments was chilling. No surgical precision was needed, just brute force and a sharp edge. The crime was primal, executed with tools gathered from a shed, not a hospital. The dumpster yielded. Meanwhile, a second team returned from the dumpster at the mobile home park entrance, carefully bringing back the bags Carmen and Clarence had discarded. They laid the contents out on a sterile tarp outside the trailer. Empty bottles of bleach, pine-scented cleaner, and several rolls of duct tape were spread across the tarp. But the most significant finds were 2 waterlogged black plastic bags filled with soaking rags and paper towels. Rodriguez took samples of the residue. "We'll get blood work on this, but based on the immediate observation, this is what they used to clean the bathroom before they painted it." They were literally trying to throw the crime scene away. Then Aiken, who had returned from transporting Clarence, pulled out the final, damning piece of evidence from a discarded clipboard found under the back bed. "Look at this, Collis. In the back bedroom, they didn't even throw away their homework." He held up a sheaf of crumpled, typed documents. They were the drafts of the threatening letter sent to Sue Bostic and Judon Burnside. The first draft contained typos and clumsy phrasing. The second was corrected. The final note was the precise, chilling message delivered to Grace's family. This is what happens if you don't follow instructions. They had kept the drafts a monument to their own meticulous cruelty. Flavel looked from the crude weapons to the typed paper. The Jenkins were a frightening combination, capable of cold, deliberate planning. The email, the typed notes, the proxy victim, and yet stupid enough to keep the paper evidence and hide in a wall cavity over a parking ticket. "They are like children playing at being villains," Flavel observed, the contempt in his voice heavy. "They wanted the drama, the fear, but they forgot about the consequences." The silence of the killer. Back at the precinct, Flavel found Clarence Jenkins waiting in an interrogation room. Clarence sat slumped in the chair, arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing on his thin lips. He looked less terrified now, replaced by a smug confidence. Aiken handed Flavel a preliminary report. "He gave us nothing, demanded his lawyer immediately, didn't even confirm his name. Carmen is being processed now, charged with harboring a fugitive and obstruction of justice, pending the search warrant results. Flavel walked into the room alone, taking the chair opposite Clarence. The camera recorded their silent exchange. "Jenkins," Flavel began, his voice low and weary. "We found the blood in your shower. We found the machete, the shears, and the drafts of the notes you sent to Grace's family. We know you killed McCole Harris." Clarence Jenkins merely adjusted his position, his eyes locked on a point above Flavel's head. "You're talking about me, Detective," Clarence finally drawled, his voice flat. "But I don't know nothing about no McCole Harris. And I want a lawyer." "A lawyer won't change the paint in your bathroom, Jenkins," Flavel countered. "A lawyer won't unchop those hands and feet. You murdered an innocent woman to manipulate another woman who wanted nothing to do with you. That is pure, pathetic evil." Clarence remained silent for a beat, the smirk widening into a mask of arrogant disdain. "I said, I want a lawyer. Anything else you say, you can tell him." The interrogation was over before it began. Clarence Jenkins was arrogant, silent, and entirely uncooperative. But Flavel didn't need his cooperation. He had the notes, the murder weapon, the physical evidence of the kill zone, and the motive provided by Grace. "Fine, Jenkins," Flavel said, rising. "Enjoy the silence. You're going to have a lot of time for it." He left the room, the scent of the trailer still clinging faintly to his clothes. He ordered a final status update. McCole Harris's body remained missing. The hands and feet were in the ME's office. The rest of her body was still the ultimate damning piece of evidence they needed for the trial. "We got the killers," Flavel told Aiken, watching the tape of the silent, smug Clarence. "Now we have to find the body." And based on this psycho's need for control, he didn't just ditch it. He put it somewhere to make a final statement. The hunt for the last scraps of McCole Harris had just begun. End of chapter 3.